A young, wonderful girl, 17 years old, walked to a shop one night and someone out of the dark threw acid in her face. So she had this massive burn. Her cheekbone was actually stuck to her shoulder. With her mouth open, with a big hole, her whole cheek was gone. Through all this time on the ship, she and her mother was just the most beautiful people. Her mother actually told us that once she was in hospital where they wanted to do surgery on her and there was a little baby who also had to go the same day, and she said, no, that baby must go first because that baby needs the surgery more than she does.
Welcome, everybody. This is Simon Gilbo with Inspired. Great to be back for another fantastic week of hearing one of my friends' testimonies. If you're new to us, basically, we just get relentlessly bombarded by negativity in the press. It's just, if you spend too much time on that stuff, you're just letting someone else curate all the bad news going on in the world to make you more depressed and cynical and anxious. And what we need is dollops of good news and encouragement from across the globe. And I've got no doubt that in an hour's time, you'll leave feeling inspired because we've got with us the wonderful Tertius Fenter. Welcome, Tertius.
Thank you so much.
So good to have you. So our mutual friend is Colin Bailey, and he was telling me about you. I was staying with him preaching in Liverpool a few weeks back, and he said, you've got to get Tertius on. So I'm speaking to you in Amsterdam right now, but often you're on a ship because you're a surgeon involved in the wonderful ministry of mercy ships, but also very involved in Amsterdam in the red light district there and in apologetics. Anyway, I'm really looking forward to hearing your story. So let's crack on with it. Tell us a bit about your background.
I grew up in a Christian home, to start right at the beginning. Wonderful parents, both Christians. Although we were in a fairly conservative church, the Dutch Reformed Church, where we didn't see much or experience much of the Holy Spirit's influence on one's lives, I did see it without my parents mentioning it. I did see it in them. How they would trust God and communicate with God and then see the actions. So for me, I grew up almost with that as normal. And then even from primary school, I only had one idea, and I wanted to be a surgeon, not a doctor. For some reason, a surgeon. And then I came into high school. I wasn't a very devoted student at school, didn't work very hard. And when I got to my final year at school, I realized if I don't work really hard and get my marks really drastically up, I will never get into medical school. So I worked hard in that last year. And when the selections came out for medical school, I was not in. So I went to university to do a Bachelor in Science degree, because from there you can move on into medical school if you do very well. But the main subject was maths. And I wasn't that great in maths because I never gave much attention to it at school. So I was there first year at university. And after 2 weeks in the maths class, I looked at this professor standing in front of the board and thought, I've got no idea what you're talking about. And I realized that if I don't do very well in maths, I can forget about my dreams of becoming a doctor and a surgeon. So that evening, I fell on my knees before God. And I said, God, my dream is slipping away, but I will do whatever you like me to do. If you want me to become a pastor, just say the word. I'll do that. I'll do whatever you want me to do. The next morning, my mother called me. She said she had a call from the university. You've been accepted into medical school.
Wow.
Yeah, I still get emotional about that. Then I knew this is the road God wanted me to go. So I went through my studies. Really, in that first year, I started working hard, and for the first time ever knew what it was to study. But actually, when I was at school still, I said to God one day that if I can become a doctor, I'll spend my first 3 years wherever you want me to go. So when I finished my school, I married my sweetheart from school just immediately after I finished my studies. And I prayed to God, right, where do you want me to go now? Show me where you want me to go. I'll go wherever you send me. And I ended up in East London, which is a city on the southeast coast of South Africa, with the idea I'm going to work at that hospital, not knowing it was actually a satellite campus of University of Cape Town. But I went there and went into the surgery department because I wanted to become a surgeon. And about in the first or second week, the local plastic surgeon from the city walked into the hospital and they told me, you'll be working with him. And the second visit that he was there, I told my wife, this is what I want to do. This fits me like a glove. So I was in East London working there. And from there, the natural movement was then to go to Cape Town University. I got a post there in training, completed my training, and felt I want to go back to East London. So I was there on the south east coast of South Africa, building up my own practice. And after a few years, I really thought, God is blessing me so much. I just can't believe it. My practice is going well. I've got a beautiful wife. My children are excelling at school and sport. I've got more than I ever thought I would have. We lived on a double-story house on the river. I had a boat. I had 3 cars. We just had more than I ever expected from life. And one day we were traveling as a family, and I thought to God, if this car takes off and I go straight up into heaven, I would have just really had everything I could expect from life. But in the back of my mind and deep in my spirit, I thought, why is God blessing me so much? Is it just for me? I can't believe that. And I started praying about that. I said, God, show me what you want me to do with my blessings, because I can't believe you just want to bless me because of me. And then it happened. So we know that when we ask God things, he will answer. So in 1999, Mercy Ships, which is an organization, it's a big passenger ship that's changed into a hospital ship and works on the coast of Africa, providing free surgeries. So this ship came past our city from Madagascar on its way to West Africa, and were in our port. And I heard a talk by the chief surgeon, who gave a talk one evening. And I thought, that's interesting. All these Christians giving free surgeries in Africa, maybe I should just find out about it. So a couple of days later, I went down to the port, asked where the ship is, went and knocked on the door. They opened up, and I said, oh, I want to volunteer. They said, okay, here's a couple of forms, fill it in. And 3 months later, I was up in the Gambia in West Africa, just for a short 10 days, never knowing how that experience will radically change my whole life and my family's life. So I came there face to face with people in desperate need and desperate poverty that I've never seen in my life. And sitting in front of them, I thought, what's the difference between me and you? I'm so blessed, and you are in such desperate situations. And I realized that the only difference is where we were born. I was born under very privileged circumstances, and they not. Our basic human needs are exactly the same. I had no say in where I was born, and neither that person in front of me. So that really touched my heart very deeply. And also just the whole Christian atmosphere on the ship, of people volunteering their free time. They pay to come to the ship, they pay to live on the ship, and they treat these patients for free. And you just see the love of Christ in those people. So I was grabbed by this love that I saw. I was grabbed by the poverty that I saw. And then about the third last night that I was on the ship before leaving, I was sitting outside on the dock, full of these emotions, but still thinking about a friend of mine who I knew since university, who was a Christian and turned away from God. And it's always been a big pain in my heart and a question, how can I bring God to you? And while I was sitting there alone on the dock, I prayed to God in all honesty and said, God, why can't I just introduce you to my friend? Why can't you stand here and my friend standing here and say his name was William, and said, just take William's hand and shake it and say, I'm God, and he can believe in you. And while I was praying that, I was suddenly overwhelmed with a presence and a peace of Christ that I've never experienced in my life. I was just like totally overwhelmed by it. And it felt like Christ was literally sitting next to me in white clothes and just saying, I will be with you always. You can't see me. I'm too holy for you to see me, but my presence will always be with you.
Wow.
From that moment, my life was different, like completely different. I never understood words that say, I'm in love with God. And I thought that it sounded ridiculous, but I was so in love with God. I just wanted to spend time as much as I could with him. I went home 3 days later, a completely different person. My wife didn't recognize this person who came back because suddenly my house on the river, my cars, my holiday cottage, everything lost its meaning. Like it just had no meaning. God was just everything for me. And I knew I can't carry on like I did before. And then slowly God's call came to me, calling me to go and serve the poor. But other dimensions came with it. The words came to me from Isaiah and from the New Testament, where Jesus read from the scroll and said, you've been called to teach the good message to the poor, the captives, and the brokenhearted. And those three suddenly made sense to me. I always had this urge to tell people who doesn't believe in God, to bring them the rationality of God and the truth and reality of God. And I saw that as the captives, people being held captive by the lies of Satan. And then also of the brokenhearted people. And I've always had a heart for prostitutes, for ladies of the night. If people would make jokes about them at university, it would just break my heart. And I realized I'm also called to go and take the gospel to them. And then thirdly, to bring the gospel to the poor. And then I thought by myself, but this was Christ's call. It's not my call. So I struggled with that for a while until one day, with these thoughts in my mind, I switched the television on and there was a priest talking, asking, how is it that Christ's call is also our call? And he said, because we are followers of Christ. We've got to follow his image and do what he did. And I realized that is my call. That's a threefold call that God has put on my life. And then he revealed to me slowly over the next year or so that I've got to go and serve him full time. Now, for my wife, it was difficult. She was also a devoted Christian, but suddenly her house, which was her security almost, was in the balance. I was saying, I'm going to close my practice. I need to follow God. And that made her very uncertain of what's going on. And the strangest thing of my call was also that I felt God is calling me to do it on my own, not leaving my family, physically in a certain sense, leaving them, but not as my family. But God was calling me without my wife, which put a tremendous stress on our marriage. And I say it with total respect, that I've said to people when I speak at churches or wherever, we had a perfect marriage until God came into our marriage and called me. And then suddenly everything was in turmoil. But we went through a 5-6 year period of very hard, how can I put it, just total turmoil and questions. But knowing God has called me and I have to be obedient to the call, he will sort it out. And God started giving me so much confirmation, telling me, I will provide for you. Because suddenly I was still paying off university debts at that time. Although I already had a lot of things in my life, but a lot of them were on debt still. And And I always had a dream of putting my children through university debt-free. And I thought, how am I going to do that now if I close my practice and not have an income anymore? But God kept on saying, I will provide for you. I will provide for you. So much so that one day I felt I could almost throw my hands up in the air and say, God, I understand what you're saying. You will provide. I believe you. And it is amazing how he provided not only financially, but spiritually for my family. Because I saw that experience that I had on the ship that night as what Andrew Murray talks about, a second blessing. So you know about God, but he brings you to a sudden, deeper experience with him. And then in those 5-6 years following, all three, my family came to that experience. And I never said anything. I believe God will do it for them. First, my daughter, she had an experience with God which brought her right into his arms. And then my son, he was in a church that he was attending. And while the pastor was preaching, he saw there was a thing coming of this altar call. And he just thought by himself, I will never do that. I'm not that sort of person. I will never get up and to the front. And when the call come to the front, he said he couldn't help himself. He just got up and walked forward. And that changed his life. And in the 5th year after my call, my wife had an experience alone at home. My 2 children were then both at university and I was away, and she just fell on the floor before God and changed her life completely.
Wow.
And on a financial level, I said to God, I don't mind about money. I will go wherever you want me. If you want me to go and live on the streets of Johannesburg to bring your gospel to the people there on the streets, I'll do that as long as you go with me. And as long as your love is with me and your presence, I'll do anything you want me to do. But I ask for only 3 things. One is that I will have the money to provide for my wife, so she's not under the burden of my call. The other thing is, if it's possible that I can put my children to university debt-free. I don't know how that would be possible, but I pray for that. And the third one is that I can travel and fly where you need me to go. That's the only 3 things that I ask for. And then out of the blue, I got an email from a company in Dublin in Ireland who asked if I could come and do locums for them for doing cosmetic surgery. Now, I didn't do plastic surgery to do cosmetic surgery. So in my practice in East London, 85% of my work was reconstructive work and about 15% cosmetic surgery, just because of the demand. But then I had enough experience to tell these people that I could do it. But initially I just thought, no, I'm not a cosmetic surgeon. I wrote to them back and said, no, I'm not interested. Then a couple of months later, I was on the ship working and they sent me another email. Said, please, we want you to come. Where they got my name to this day, I don't know where and why they asked me. But suddenly it dawned on me, but I can fund my missions with the money that I can earn there. And I started working for them. So after 6 years after the call came in 2006, I felt God said to me, because he kept on saying, wait, your family is not ready. You're not ready. I'll tell you when you can come. And in 2006, I felt now's the time. Closed my practice, told all my colleagues, invited them for a meal and showed them a PowerPoint about mercy ships and said, I'm leaving my practice. I'm stopping working for money. I'm going full-time for God. And he promised that he would provide. And we left East London, moved to Cape Town where my wife lives, and I traveled from there all over the world. So with the money that I earned in Dublin, I could put both my children through university debt-free. I could buy them each a car in cash. I could put away some money so that my wife can be independent. And 3 months after my second child, they both were at university about 7 years. 3 months after my second child was finished, the work in Dublin just stopped. in 2012,
Right.
from 1 month
Wow.
to the next. And the reason for that was that the insurance that covered me for medical indemnity just said to me, you are doing this work and then traveling back into Africa all the time. We're worried that something happens to your patients and you're not there, which wasn't really true because there were other surgeons looking after our patients. But they refused to cover my cost. My insurance again and said, unless you move to Ireland and do this full time, we're not going to cover you further. I said, okay, that's it. And I felt God said, I've provided the money that you needed. From now on, I'm going to provide for you. So since 2012, I've not been working for money. God has just been providing in the most amazing ways. After about 6 months, I was at one point so low on money that I had just enough to give my wife her monthly support for one more month, and then I would have been out of money. And I was also on the ship on that particular day, and I prayed to God about it. Not saying, God, I don't trust you, where you have to provide. No, I just talked about it and said, I just trust you. I just know it something will happen. And when I switched my laptop on the very first email I opened, someone that I've never met before put $3,000 in my account.
Love that.
And from there, God has just been providing all the time. I've never had not the money to fly where I need to go. The money is always there. Sometimes I don't really have the money. Like 3 years ago, my mother passed away. I didn't have the money at that point to fly home for the funeral, and someone just provided it within a day or two. Just gave me enough money, €1,000 for a flight back home. And I can just testify that God has been so faithful and keep on providing in every way for me financially and for my family spiritually. So although I'm physically away from home 10 months of the year, they are totally behind me. They all love. My daughter and son are married now with children. All of them are just totally devoted to God. And I'm just so thankful to see his provision and to see how his promises came true in my life.
Wonderful. Jehovah Jireh, our provider. Well, I've got lots of those stories as well, and it's just wonderful, isn't it, when you cast everything on him. He's the surest bet, no doubt about that. Hey folks, I'm loving the impact of the podcast and how much joy and encouragement it's bringing. Listen, here's some potential action points if you're enjoying it. The first one is we love feedback. So why don't you tell us where you listen to the podcast and how it's impacted your life by sending us a 1-minute voice note to podcast@greatlakesoutreach.org. We might air a few of those. Another thing you could do is give us a review on Spotify or iTunes. Subscribe there. Also, can you subscribe to our YouTube channel? We're trying to grow our presence there, and actually that is a key way of getting it out there further. Another way is to recruit new signups. So could you think of 3 people you could say, yeah, hey, this podcast, I'm loving it, and I'd love you to engage with it as well. And then lastly, if you want to give to the work, this podcast comes out under the auspices of Great Lakes Outreach. We're working in Burundi, which is currently the second poorest and the hungriest country in the world. The needs are absolutely massive. And what's amazing, and we never did it for this purpose, but the money that's coming in through people like yourselves who are loving it is funding 5 ministries out in Burundi right now. That's impacting thousands upon thousands of lives. So, if you gave 20 quid a month, 20 quid here is like 200 quid out there, or $50 a month, that's like $500 of impact. I just stick a 0 on it in terms of knowing how far money goes out there. So we'd love it. You could do a one-off or a regular monthly support to greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. That's greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. And let's spread the love. All right. So 4 potential action points. You could do 1 or all 4. So that's feedback, sending in a voice note to us. You could give us a great review on Spotify or iTunes and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You could recruit others and gossip the podcast and get other signups, or you could give to greatlakesoutreach.org/inspired. I'll put all those links in the show notes below. And now let's get back to the podcast. So, I've worked 20 some years in Burundi, Central Africa, and a lot of it has been on the west coast of Africa. And you come across these cases, don't you, where sometimes someone's got this goiter or something that's become, because it hasn't been treated in the jungle, it's become like 10 kilos, or you've got this extraordinary sort of manifestation, like the size of a football that's growing out of someone's neck. Or tell us about some of the beautiful surgeries you've been able to do.
You see, there's about 8 billion people on this earth. 5 billion people hasn't got access to medical care. 5 billion. So 2/3 almost of the world hasn't got access to care. So what happens, and especially surgical care, there are millions and millions of people dying of simple surgical problems and just dying because they can't get the care that they need. So if you think of a goiter, or what we do with tumors of the face or the mandible, these things start small. And it sometimes, especially in the face, it can be excised by your GP under local anesthetic. But it keeps on growing. And something that's benign and curable now becomes a life-threatening disease, and sometimes kill people simply because they don't have anybody to look after them. We see people, we do a lot of cleft lip and palates, and I see people coming in, they're 70 years old with this massive open lip and walk their whole life like that. And it takes us an hour under local anesthetic to repair that for them.
Yeah.
Burn surgeries, which we do a lot, is about probably 30 or 40% of my work. Now, burn contractures, in other words, if you've had a burn and it's not been properly managed, then your body has to close it by itself, and it just, the sides of the wounds close together, and it bends up your joints into non-functional positions. So burns in Africa is a disease of poverty, because what happens is there are no electricity in their homes, so they may have to make fires. So the children crawls into the fires, or they pull pots with hot liquids over themselves, or it catches fire and the people just have these massive burn injuries. And then they've got nowhere to go, because, as I said, 2/3 of the world hasn't got access to medical care. So they have to cope it by themselves. Many of them with the bigger burns will just die after a couple of weeks. But some will survive with these horrific burn contractures. And then they come to the hospitals and to the ship where I work, and we can actually treat them and give them functionality back. And one also must think about the economic implications of that. If you have someone, even with a cleft lip, who's not going to school because he gets mocked at school, and the parents often believe it's a curse on their family, so they hide the child. Or someone with a burn injury and they can't use their limbs. They can't go to school, they can't find a job. So you've got someone who's got to look after them. Or say a patient with a cataract who's blind. You need someone to look after them. So there's two people taken out of the economy. And if you can restore those defects for them, there's two people going back who can go and work and earn money for the economies. So it's got wide effects on not only the local family, but on the communities and on the countries. I mean, it's well known that the better your healthcare in a country is, the better your economy does in that country. And the same obviously with schooling.
Yeah. I think of a friend of mine called Freddie, and Freddie fell in a fire. He had an epileptic fit, so his face, he lay in the fire and melted away. And I came across him years later, but my friend Ali, who's been on the podcast, she saw him with a hoodie on as a beggar, and he had a stump of a hand and just horrendous burns, and his jaw was completely malformed, and he was just dribbling everywhere, and he was like the ugliest person in the country, basically. I mean, I'm sure there are a few such cases, but she took him up to what would have been you in Rwanda, a guy called Russian surgeon called Yuri, who did hours and hours of plastic surgery until he was left in a coma. And Yuri said, if he survives this coma, he'll need to wait 10 years. Bring him back in 10 years. 10 years later, I was now in Burundi. Ali tells me about him. I said, well, let's go and track down Freddie. And so we drove 3 hours into the bush. We just basically said, where's the melted face guy? And eventually we tracked him down, and we were talking about him like he was a project, and it was in English. And he replied in English, and he was self-taught, his fourth language in the bush. He was so impressive. And so I was like, wow, this boy is special. And so we flew him twice to Kenya. He had over 100 hours of plastic surgery, reconstructive operation. And you can't do away with those scars fully, can you? But you can give someone dignity and restore them. And we sponsored him. He got a distinction in his degree, and he's a legend on his patch. Everyone knows him because he's suffered so much, but he's a radiant believer. And he's found Floride, a lady who can see through the scars, and she's married him, and they've had 2 kids. And he's in the pain a lot, but he is just so beautiful. Well, the man looks at the outward appearance, God looks at the heart. He's got a stunning heart, and so I've experienced that in Burundi. Like, I guess you're doing loads of those. I mean, every day. I heard you talked that you're doing 14 to 16 hours a day of surgeries, day after day. Is that right? How can you sustain that?
Yeah, it's amazing because God just gives one the strength to do that. People often ask me, don't you get tired? Because we often, if it's a 12 or 14-hour surgery, we take a 15-minute, 20-minute break once, maybe. But you're so involved in the case, and you're so motivated to do the best that you can to help that person. Because each person is just so valuable to God.
Yes.
And he gives you the opportunity to help them. And it's just like you don't think about anything else except trying to do this as best as you can to help this person, to help him to heal as well as he can. And to see the difference in those patients afterwards is like no money can buy that. We often see children who's had burns, and they went through the long period of healing without hospital care, without medication. And now they come onto the ship. Suddenly there's this big white ship with white people that they sometimes never seen in their lives. And they go in there, and we're looking at their burns injury sites. So they are so scared because everything is just so new, and they remember the pain of the areas that you're touching. And then you do the surgery on them, and 2-3 weeks later, they're just running up and down, laughing, little children just so happy. Because not only is the pain gone, not only are they starting to trust us, but they also see the love and the care that the nurses and the doctors are just giving to them, and they just experience that. And to see those kids running and laughing. They always say our plastic surgical wards are the loudest wards on the ship, because that's where most of the children are, and they just always playing and shouting and screaming and just happy. And that is just so beautiful to see that, and such a blessing.
A couple of weekends ago, I was in Rwanda, flying back from Burundi, and stopped off with my mate John Cropsey, who's a fantastic eye surgeon, and he showed us films of, what a fantastic job John has, because, I think these cataract surgeries can cost like $25 or something, and there was this lady, I think she hadn't seen for 30 years, and they peel back her eye protectors that she's worn post-op, and then she just dances and screams hallelujah and is grabbing and hugging everyone. It's so beautiful. So that's those eye surgery. But give us your best, give us your favorite Mercy Ship memories. I know there's so many.
It is really difficult. People often ask me about, what are there specific patients that's standing out? And then there's just a million going through your mind, because every patient is just so special. And I think maybe the one that comes up in my mind now is that I've treated recently in Madagascar. A young, wonderful girl, 17 years old. She walked to a shop one night, and someone out of the dark threw acid in her face. she still doesn't know who it was or what the motivation were. It was just like an act of evil. So she had this massive burn of half her face down to her shoulder. And again, initially tried to treat it herself, went to a local hospital. They could just like clean out the dead tissue. She ended up with her cheekbone was actually stuck to her shoulder with her mouth open with a big hole. Her whole cheek was gone. So if you imagine someone with the cheekbone stuck to your shoulder with the mouth open, so the saliva was just dripping out all the time, running onto her body. She could hardly eat because she couldn't close her mouth.
That was like Freddie, yeah.
It was one of the saddest patients that I've ever seen, and she was such a beautiful person. She told us, her mother actually told us that once she was in hospital where they wanted to do surgery on her, and there was a little baby who also had to go the same day. And she said, no, that baby must go first because that baby needs the surgery more than she does. So we've treated her last year on the ship. It's one of the patients that we did like a 14, 15-hour surgery on. And then to close the hole in the mouth took another multiple surgeries. And I've just recently been in Madagascar in March or April this year, and we did the last surgery of her. Her head is straight now, her cheek is closed, and her mouth is closed and is in a normal position again. And when we go back next year, we plan to see her again. No functional improvement, but because she's got everything now that she needs, but we're going to try to make her looking more pretty and more human again after this horrendous incident. And through all this time on the ship, she and her mother was just the most beautiful people, and just so wonderful to work with and to communicate with.
Wonderful. Yes, I think of Annecy, and Annecy was dropped off at our clinic, and she had fallen in a fire, and her kids had rushed home, and they smelt meat, and they were excited they were going to have food, and it was their mum in the fire, and she was burnt through to her skull, and she was dropped off at our clinic, but by a Catholic priest who had well-intentioned, but he just got some manure in straw and put it on her face to, I don't know what the thinking was, but it was so desperate. And anyway, we got where John was, and I want to shout out to the Kibuye Hospital in Burundi, and Jason Fader and others, that he basically did a skin graft from her from her arm, that's it, her arm to her forehead to try to get it to take. And I think I think she was there for about 3 years of just being loved and loved in Jesus' name. I know that's what Mercy Ships does, isn't it? Just loving people in Jesus' name. And people experience the fragrance of Christ. And again, she was such a beautiful, sort of cheerful woman. I mean, one eye had been completely burnt off. She had minimal vision in the other eye, but she just exuded joy because, joy can defy circumstances, can't it?
Yeah. We've had one of the patients, it wasn't my patient, but a patient who had Noma had a huge defect in her face because of a childhood infection, a big hole in her face, basically. And she was treated and healed well. And then someone asked her, what is the thing that touched you most when you, in the time on your ship? And she said, what really touched me was when I came on the ship the first day, and one of the crew of the ship came to me, touched my arm, and said, how can I help you? And that human touch for her was one of the biggest events in her life, that someone who, despite her facial deformity, despite the way she looked, would come to her, touch her, and just say, what can I do for you? And that act of love is the thing that impressed her much more than her now looking more normal and more human again. So we must never underestimate what love can do and what a human touch can do.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Susie, and I love listening to the podcast when I'm cooking. It's just so encouraging. I get so much enjoyment out of it. I'm also a supporter of Glow, amazing organisation. So everything about the podcast is brilliant.
I remember one story that I heard you tell about you were just leaving, you were on leave, and you just walked down the gangplank and someone came.
Yeah, it was actually on my very first visit on the ship that I was just ready to leave for the airport. But I was a bit early and I walked down the gangway. These days, when the ship's in the port, nobody can get close to the ship. The security is very tight. But at that stage, it wasn't tight. So I walked down there and I found a young man of around about 20 standing at the gangway with a big cleft in his lip, which he's had for his whole life, obviously. And he just looked at me and said, "Can someone help me?" And I just thought, yes, I can, you know. So I ran up back into the ship. I just said, wait. I ran up back into the ship, ran into the operating room and said, "Can I do a cleft lip quickly? I've got an hour to do it under local anesthetic." And obviously the ship is just people loving people. So they said, Of course, bring him in. And within half an hour, the guy was lying on the operating room. I put local anesthetic in his lip, repaired his lip, and it must have been such an experience for this guy. He was desperate, finding the ship and hoping maybe someone can help him. 2 hours later, he left the ship with his lip healed forever. And that was just, I mean, for me, it was fantastic, but I can't imagine what was going on in his mind. Within a day, his whole life changed. And that is what God is doing in people's lives. You know, he would just touch people's lives. And if you seek, you will find. And I'm sure that the love that is experienced on that ship and knowing that it's a Christian ship will also have a lasting impression on him.
Wonderful. Well, God bless you and all those that are involved in that massive team. I think it's 400 workers, aren't there, on the ship, and you've done thousands of surgeries and blessed thousands or even, I don't know, tens of thousands of people, certainly through Mercy Ships and their ministry. It's so beautiful. Listen, just in terms of time, I want to just pivot across to your involvement in the red light district there in Amsterdam. I think there are two famous red light districts in Europe, particularly. I worked in the one in Hamburg, the Reeperbahn, and yes, I mean, what evil places they are, and yet the light shines brightest in the darkest places, doesn't it? So what does that look like for you?
I mean, it was such a clear call from God to, you know, how I ended up in Amsterdam specifically and how I ended up there specifically. It is a whole story on its own. But God showed me exactly this house that I'm sitting in now, to buy it, how he provided the money for me to buy it, and then to go into the red light district. And again, one of the almost frustrations of my call, but I believe God does it with a purpose, is that I don't see the results. You know, I do surgeries on so many people, but I don't see the long-term results because the ship is there for I'm there for a couple of months, the ship maybe 10 months, then we're away. And you don't see a year later what the impact. I now and then get feedback and just wonderful to see, but most of the times you don't know exactly what's happening to those patients. And the same with in the red light district. I prayed about it because what I do is I used to go into the red light district at 11 or 12 at night and just pray to God to show me where to go in. You know, it's just heartbreaking to see these girls behind these windows. It's just like terrible. And that is what shocked me the first time when I went in there. And then I would walk around there and just think, I can never go in and talk to anybody now. But I have my Bibles with me, with a CD or some music and some literature and Bibles in different languages and about 12 translations of the book of John. And then I would just walk and think, I'm not going home before I see 3 people, but I'm not sure how I can do this. and I keep on walking. And then suddenly I would just feel like an amazing release and feel like God says, go into this room. And I would knock on the door, open it up. Obviously, they would think I'm a client, but I would just say, I've just come to give you something. And then they sort of, what do you mean? Nobody gives me something. And so I've come here to give you something and just want to tell you how much God loves you. And then I ask them, what language do you speak? Where are you from? And they quite willing to say. And then I know exactly in my pockets where the Bibles are, because they're all hidden when I walk there, because they will not open the door for you if they see you've got books with you, because they don't want these freaks to come in there. So then I would take out a Bible in their own language and tell them, here's a Bible for you. Just know that God loves you. And then I would leave. And I've often asked God, can't I just do more? And God is repeatedly saying to me, I've called you to sow the word of God there. That's your job. I will do the growing and the reaping. That is what I want you to do. But every now and then I would get encouraged by, one night I gave a girl a Gospel of John in Bulgarian. She was Bulgarian. And I said, I don't have a Bible in your language, but I've got part of the Bible for you. And I gave it to her. And she looked at me and said, no, I want the whole Bible. So I said, okay, I'll see if I can bring one for you tomorrow evening, or if you're still here. No, I'll be here. So I went into Amsterdam and I really found a Bulgarian Bible and took it back to her the next night. And to me, that is always such an encouragement, because most of them, they're very thankful if I do give them a Bible and my literature that I have with me. And the song God of the Moon and Stars, which is a wonderful song about people in the red light district, and how God cares for them. But I've also walked there one night just praying that God will show me where to go in. And I went past one of these communal areas, almost like a brothel area, just walking past there, praying, but my eyes were open, just walking. And one of the guys who always stands there, very friendly, inviting you in and trying to encourage you to come in there so they can make money out of you, he stormed down at me and in my face pulled the most ugly face and making the most unearthly noises in my face.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is just evil that's done this, because that's not what he should do with a potential client. And there's no ways that he can know I'm not a client walking around in the red light district. And I just knew that is just the devil trying to chase me out of the area.
Yeah.
So things like that does happen, encouraging me. And that's not discouraging me. That is also encouraging me, because I know I'm doing the right thing. I know God is in it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can have similar experiences in Hamburg, where we would do street outreach and literally bringing out a cross, and guys that previously we've been talking to and were totally fine at the cross or at the mention of the name of Jesus, demons would manifest and suddenly we'd be spat at and punched and attacked. And it was, wasn't fun to be punched or spat at, but actually it was like, yes, this is real. This is a clash of kingdoms, and we are bringing the light of Jesus into these very dark places. And the tragedy is that, there are thousands and thousands of sex tourists. They're tourists. They're not seeing these precious ladies as women in the image of God. I mean, and these young kids. I mean, I think of a little girl who was, eating sweets and candy and playing with my teammate, and then she shook her fist up and down and laughed, and my friend said, "What does that mean?" That gesture, and she said, "Well, that's what I do to men in the back alleys to get 1 Deutschmark or 40p or just a few cents, whatever it was," and it's just so evil. It's just evil, isn't it? So God bless you, brothers. You do that, and I think, am I right that you finance it? One of the things we got in common is that we both cycled across America. Is that what you do all your crazy cycling experiences for?
Yes, it started 10 years ago. In fact, it's 11 years ago now, when the ship was going to Guinea in West Africa, Ebola broke out.
Right.
So they cancelled our visit on short notice, that we couldn't go to Guinea, and they couldn't organize a new country in a very short period. So I sadly sat with two months available. That wasn't planned. I planned to go to the ship, but now I was not going. And just about a month or two before that, I was at a medical conference in Rotterdam, and a surgical registrar, someone in training for surgery in Africa and Cameroon, I met there and spoke to him. And he said, "Oh, you must come to Cameroon. Please, we need you. Come and visit us." But I didn't have the money to go there, so I couldn't organize that. And when I suddenly had this 2 months free, I thought, now I can go there, but I don't have the money to go there. But what about doing a bike trip and as a fundraiser? So I cycled from Amsterdam to Stuttgart, which is about 600 kilometers, and raised enough money to go to Cameroon. But while I was planning that and just preparing for that, it came up into my mind, and I believe God put it there, that I said, you must do 3 bike rides and treble your distance every time.
Huh.
So I did that one. And then the next one, well, now 600, so it's got to be 1,800 kilometers. So I cycled in South Africa from Pretoria to Cape Town for mercy ships. Not a fundraiser for myself, really. But I did that and then said, well, now I've got to travel that distance again. So then it came up in my mind, I'll cycle across the United States. That was 2015. And I cycled from New York to San Francisco, but not in a straight line. I went from New York south to North Carolina, from there right up to Minneapolis, turned back down to Dallas, from there across the Mexican border, just above the Mexican border, to San Diego, and up to San Francisco, about 6,500 kilometers. And God gave me word that I must spread the message of the poor. So in that trip of 6,500 kilometers, which we did in about 60 days, 12 race days and 48 cycling days. Wow. It was just amazing how God blessed it, because he also sent someone with me who grew up in YWAM and was organizing lots of events. So I spoke at churches, at schools, at universities, on television, on radio, spoke to magazines. We worked out at the end, I spoke to nearly 20 million people about the need of the poor during that trip. So that was 10 years ago. Since then, I've been doing more fundraising here in Europe, in another one in South Africa, and I've from here been to the UK and Ireland and Scotland as a trip. And now this year is my 10th anniversary of the first one across America, and I thought I want to do that again. But then I felt this time I'm not going to do fundraising for myself. I'm going to do it for a project. Now, I work in different countries in Africa, also with cure hospitals, which are children's hospitals, or only doing orthopedic and plastic surgery. So some of them are Muslim countries. And when I see the parents, Muslims, praying outside the hospitals and outside the wards, I know they're getting the message of the gospel while they're there. But I was thinking about the children, and my heart breaks for that children who goes home to a Muslim home again. And I thought, what can I do to bring the message? What can I, as a surgeon, do to bring the message to them that will last? And I thought, well, if I think of my childhood, we all remember pictures in Bibles of Daniel in the lion's den, or David and Goliath, or these stories. And we remember those pictures that we saw. I thought, what about Bible picture books for children? So I've made that my fundraising for the hospitals that I work in. And we've got a GoFundMe fund. We're aiming for 700 Bibles at $18 a Bible. And God has been blessing it. We've not even started with a tour, and I've almost got 7,000 euros in already. Brilliant. Towards that. That's about 400 Bibles. But that is the purpose of this bike ride from Jacksonville in Florida across to San Diego in California. The shortest route I could find across America, because I just have 30 days to do it. I can't spend more time on the bike.
Right. Wow, that's about what I'm guessing. It's about 120 miles a day. We were doing 105 miles a day.
Yeah, it's 150, 160 kilometers a day, so it's about 90 miles a day.
Oh, it's great stuff, Tertius. And you're still turbocharged, and you're not as young as you were, but keep going on that bike. It's just wonderful. What does the future hold? Where do you feel like the Lord is calling you?
Well, I certainly pray and believe that I will be doing surgeries in Africa for the next 10 or 15 years still. As long as I'm able to do that, I'm the one thing that we haven't touched, which I'll just mention in short, and that is my call to bring the gospel to the captives, to the agnostic and the atheist. But more than that, just to bring the gospel in a real truth manner to everybody. So I've just finished writing a book about basically Christian apologetics. It's called Unlocking Truth, a journey to discovering God and Christianity, and a challenge to the skeptic. And that book, I hope, will be published quite soon. We've just developed a website about the book. And I can see that writing will get more and more into my daily activities. I've published 2 books before. The one is The Secret of Beauty, and the other one was also Conversations with Me and a Skeptic on the Internet, which I've changed into a book. But I can see doing that, and I've got a blog that I write about apologetics, and just carry on with that, using the internet and the media to spread the gospel.
So I'm trying to imagine the average day or the perfect day in Tertius Venter's life. Maybe it's a sort of a 4-hour cycle ride from 3 a.m, and then 5 surgeries, a few facial reconstructions, and then a bit of evening apologetics over a beer in the pub. Would that be a good day?
Yeah. Yes, it's more broken into weeks and months.
Yeah, sure.
So I work 4 months of the year on the ship, 4 months with Cure, and 4 months I'm busy putting away for all my writing.
Yeah.
And when I'm on ship, I've got a bike on the ship, so I can go on weekends biking there.
Nice. Well, I'm so relieved to hear that your wife and your children are passionate for Jesus, and they're not sort of casualties of the call of God in your life, because that is God's testimony as well, isn't it? The one who calls you is faithful, and he will do it. 1 Thessalonians 5:24. There's no regrets of being on it. Have you got any regrets of laying down the house and the several cars and all that sort of stuff?
Never, ever. I can just say, Paul wrote in Colossians that I'm driven and compelled by the love of Christ. And that to me is my biggest blessing in my life. And to look back and to see my children and my wife, who's come close to God and live in a close relationship to God, that is just the biggest thankfulness in my life. And that I can live out my call, which is difficult because I'm away 10 months of the year. It's hard. But seeing the blessing that God bestows on each of us is just like, I'm just eternally thankful for that.
Wonderful. Yeah, folks, I don't think Tertius's call is by any stretch everyone's call. It's not the norm either, spending that much time away, but it is beautiful to hear of God's faithfulness in that, in as he's embraced that cost, and they've embraced that cost as well. Any last words for us, Tertius?
I just think, that God has got a plan for each of our lives. And if we submit to him, if we give up for him, he just blesses us tremendously. Firstly, with himself, which is the biggest blessing we can experience, is God himself, his presence and his love. But then also to see his hand and how he's providing all the time is just a huge blessing. So don't be ever afraid to surrender completely to God.
Amen. Well, listen, we'll put your various details in the blurb so people can track with you and follow your work and contribute and get behind the ministry if you like. But I want to thank you, Tertius. It's been a great conversation. God bless you, brother.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Guys, give us a great review, please, on Spotify, iTunes. Gossip this podcast with people. I love it, isn't it? It's the first version we've had. We're on podcast number 2019, I think, but trying to get every career going. You can be Christ in whatever context with the gifts that God has given you, and we've all got a different race to run. We've got the same destination. We've got to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus. Do that all the way, whatever you're going through. I hope you're encouraged this week, and next week another fantastic guest from a very different life story, but keep on going strong. I want to thank Adam Thomas Steer for the editing, Mike Sandman for the mixing, and meantime, have a good week. God bless you, and toodaloo.